Good afternoon and welcome to the Hibs Observer post-match debrief with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Patrick McPartlin to take a look back at Dundee United 1, Hibs 3 at Tannadice last night. A hugely dramatic finish to the game up in Tayside and another really important 3 points for Hibs. Before we get started, just as always, a word for our sponsor, Good Vibes Giveaways. They're proud to sponsor the Hibs Observer and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes will change weekly and include tech and gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash and even Oasis tickets, so you can get your tickets now at www.goodvibegiveaways.com. Patrick, how are we? That was a dramatic finish last night, wasn't it?
It was very dramatic. I think just about recovered from just all the everything that happened, like 10 minutes of injury time,
all the
VAR, all the things. I think we'll obviously cover everything that happened in the course of the video, but I'm just quite incredible that this Hibs team continues to roll on despite not being anywhere near their best. Hibernian Football Club, indeed. I think it's
more.
That's it. Wrap the video up. I think we've obviously watched Hibs since the start of the season. We've seen how they've turned it around from when they couldn't sort of buy a win at the start of the campaign to now just being able to grind out results, whether that's draws or in last night's case a victory, even when they're not very good. And I think that ultimately is the sign of a team that's in a good place. And you look at teams like Celtic and Rangers, and in other leagues, the teams that are winning titles year after year, even teams that are getting to Europe, finishing high up the table, they're all capable of doing this. When you go into a game, you're maybe not your best, but somehow you find a way to win, or somehow you find a way to get a point. And Hibs seem to be getting very good at doing that.
Yeah, they do. They've made it a habit now, which is obviously clearly a very good thing. Again, last night, David Gray bringing Mikola Kugarevich back into the side, still clearly being very careful with Kieran Bowie, but we'll get to him in due course. It wasn't an ideal start. I feel like Hibs, they looked comfortable in the game for those first few minutes, but then it was a goal out of nowhere, really, wasn't it? A deflected shot from Ross Graham. And it was kind of, you were starting to think then, right, okay, we'll maybe see, what Hibs are made of, because it was a huge effort at the weekend to get over the line against Celtic, and then going behind at a difficult venue, responded well, got the equaliser through Kugarevich, and then obviously that finish takes care of itself at the very end. First half, there was, again, I think you could say that's probably for about 95% of the game. I think there was very little in it. It was a wee bit scrappy, not a lot of fluency from either side. Basically, just wasn't a great watch for a lot of it, was it?
No, I don't think so. But I think when you look at how the two teams have been, performing, and you look at the way they set up, I think it was probably always going to be a bit of a battle, especially with as it coming in the middle of a 3-game week. What I thought was interesting was we looked at how Hibs started against Celtic, and they obviously got that fast start. They got the goal, which kind of seemed to be playing with the fact that Celtic had a midweek game, and they put in a huge amount of effort against Bayern Munich, and were maybe a little bit sluggish, a little bit slow to get going to Easter Road. I think we saw the same last night with Hibs. I think they just put so much into Saturday's game. I was a little bit surprised there weren't a couple more changes actually. It's probably down to the fact that that there are a lot of athletes in this team. Players who can sort of keep going, who can go again. But I think, as you say, there was just the one change, Kugarevich coming for Bowie up front, which, we can talk about in a minute. But I think it was probably a bit similar from Hibs' point of view, that they were, probably a little slow to get going. Partly because of the after effects of Saturday, and just the fact that it's, meaning no disrespect to Dundee United, but, the game didn't have the same sort of atmosphere that Saturday's game did. So I just sort of felt that was maybe a little bit that sort of tiredness creeping in, a slow start. Obviously it's a deflected goal, but Rocky Bashiri heads the ball out, and nobody's really making much of a move towards Ross Graham to close him down. Takes it well, like we say, deflection to help it past Jordan Smith. But I think we've said before, this Hibs team doesn't really seem to know when they're beaten, and there was a part of me that was sort of thinking, are we going to see like a return to when Hibs were conceding early goals and then not really being able to recover from it. I mean, to be fair, against Dundee back in November, they scored early and then it all collapsed. So, it goes both ways. But I think David Gray's spoken about the togetherness in this team, and I think when they suffer setbacks like this, it's not a sort of like rip up the game plan, start again, tweak things, make some substitutions. I think it's just okay. It's an early setback, but just set out to do what we set out to do, and if things go well, then we'll get our rewards, which they did. A sort of series of corners at the other end, and then eventually one of them from Nicky Cadden lands right on Kola Kurevich's head, and then that's an equaliser. Hibs are back in the game. So I think we probably saw a sort of slightly sluggish start from Hibs, but something that they managed to kind of recover from. Although certainly from probably about the hour mark onwards, you could see some players were pretty much running on fumes. And some smart subs from the coaching team, which we can talk about as well. But I think it's a combination of just like not knowing when they're beaten and just kind of staying focused on the task in hand. There's never sort of looking too much, looking too far ahead. It's always just this is what we're here to do, so we'll go and do it. It's just keeping it simple.
Yeah, heading into there's not really much else to discuss from that first half, to be honest.
No,
heading into the second, Dundee United thought they'd taken the lead. A head up from Sam Dalby from a set piece was subject to a long VAR check, and then which then resulted at the end of the game in that I think it was 9 minutes added on. Dundee United aren't happy about it. I think if you've even a cursory glance at social media today, it will tell you that it was a long time to get to the decision that they reached. I think that was first checked for an offside, and eventually the infringement was given for a handball. So, what did you make of it? I think it's probably one of those ones, I think if it goes against, if you're being brutally honest, if it goes against your team, you're really, you're pretty upset about that. It felt like a really marginal one. But obviously Hibs have been on the end, the wrong end of a couple of those decisions this season, notably against Dundee United when they came to Easter Road before Christmas. What did you make of it?
It's like I've said with every other VAR incident we've kind of talked about, whether it's gone in Hibs' favour or against Hibs. If it's taken that long to make a decision, it's not clear and obvious, and that's kind of why it was brought in. We were told at the very start that clear and obvious errors, and it kind of seems like not just with games that Hibs are involved in, but other games as well. Like if you're taking 3, 4, 5 minutes to carry out these checks, then surely it's not clear and obvious, and that kind of suggests that the whole clear and obvious approach has been somewhat abandoned. And I think just talking about it in general, I don't want to turn this into another VAR rant, but if you're going to be using it, then you're standing around for 3, 4, 5 minutes while the decision's made. You're interrupting the flow of the game. It's Jim Goodwin's actually pointing out one of his players had to come off because the length of time it took to make the decision. The player had sort of stiffened up and felt they couldn't continue without risking injury. So I think we've maybe not seen too many instances of that, but if that's going to become a regular sort of feature where, especially in sort of 3 game weeks like this when you're playing in midweek, if you're standing around for so long waiting for a decision to be made that, you start stiffening up, that, your muscles or whatever are starting to tighten, then, I think that in itself suggests something's wrong with it. Mm-hmm. On the incident itself, this sort of suggestion this morning that they couldn't draw the lines to check for offside just feel, because I think the line was there were too many players in the way. And you think that's not a great look. If you can't check, if VAR has been brought in to check for offside and you can't sort of simply check for offside because you can't draw the lines, then I know you could argue it's maybe still in its infancy to a certain extent. It's not a perfect system, but then sport isn't meant to be perfect, so you can't make it perfect. But that just seems a bit mad. And looking back at I've seen the incident from a lot of angles. it's not clear, and it's not clear and obvious. It's not sort of one of those where you say, oh yeah, that's obviously hit his arm or anything like that. Watching Dermot Gallagher on Sky Sports Ref Watch before he came on here, he suggests that the ball is going wide, and it's actually because it hits Dalby's arm. That's what takes it into the net, which is a take. I think it just comes down to it's similar with the corner incident, which again, Jim Goodwin very, very incensed about, and I think having seen video of that back, understandable. But I think it boils down to if the referee, if the VAR are not confident on something, then it's hard to see what they do. If they're sort of watching something back and think, well, I can't see whether it's a handball, I can't see whether it's a corner, and then it's I think it's one of those where, as you pointed out, if it happens to your team, then you're raging, and if it sort of goes in your favour, then you're probably feeling quite good about it. What I would say is that I think we've seen plenty of teams getting very kind of marginal VAR calls going against them, and we've seen them in favour as well. Boils down to what I've said before, that bringing in the VAR kind of system was never going to make things perfect, because you've still got humans using the technology, and humans can make mistakes. And it feels a little bit. It's a shame. Like after another Hibs win, we're talking about the officials, we're talking about the VAR. Having seen both incidents back, can completely understand why Jim Goodwin and the Dundee United players are fuming. But at the same time, it's even without VAR, I think some decisions go for you, some go against you. So obviously the same thing is going to happen with VAR. But I think it's it was pointed out last night as well. The clubs are paying for this, and I don't think there's a manager in the Scottish Premiership who hasn't at some point railed against VAR and its sort of imperfections, and not so much as imperfections maybe, but the way it's being used, and the way that depending on who the referee is, depending on who the VAR is, it's the interpretation of incidents that changes. There's no consistency, and that's I think why why sort of managers and players are getting frustrated by it, which I think is perfectly understandable. I'm not a fan. I've sort of said this, when it works well, fine. We saw it again for Junior Hoylett's goal, where it was a tight call. They played it back. He was deemed to be onside. The goal's given. So fine. It was fairly straightforward in that case. But it's more often than not, it isn't straightforward. And I think that's where the problem lies. That it's sort of slowly, and it's kind of slowly sucking the life out of a lot of games. And it's difficult when we're in the press box, the fans are in the stands, even sometimes the players, you're sort of thinking, well, what's going on? Why is it taking so long? But again, I suppose it's a bit like you can only play what's in front of you. You can only sort of deal with the decisions that you're dealt. And obviously the corner incident looks like it comes off Nathan Mariah Welsh. It's a goal kick. Hibs then go up the other end and score. But I think, again, going on the ref watch from Dermot Gallagher's comments, if a referee isn't sure in a case like that, then they would give the goal kick. Yeah. So that's an explanation for it. I don't think it's one that will, I don't think there's any cause for Jim Goodwin to calm down if he's told that. But he sort of pointed out last night. He said they also could have defended it better, which is a fair point. But at that stage, you come to the end of the game, you've got bodies up front. You're trying to get a winner in a game that's could be huge in the race for third, fourth, Europe, you name it. So I think just we don't want to be sort of talking about Hibs game and just focusing on VAR, but unfortunately that's where we are once again.
Yeah, aye, it was likes to step in as the main character, and I think it's I know this is kind of, some people may think this is a bit strange because this is a decision that's gone for Hibs, and we're still kind of sitting here debating it. But I think it'll, you can guarantee it'll not be long until one goes the other way, because it happens to every club really. And I think the big thing for me has always been kind of the experience in the stadium for the the people who have paid money to be there, and you're that nobody's really got a clue what's going on other than a sort of short announcement on the tannoy, or a sort of kind of vague check handball, but it kind of doesn't provide an awful lot of clarity, like maybe on like the one of the sort of big screens, like because it got to the point last night where we're sitting in the press box. There's a few of us huddled round trying to watch a replay, and then directly outside you've got maybe like 5-10 Dundee United fans like staring a hole through the press box as if to look at us and say what's going on, and then you're kind of looking back and you're like, well we've not got a clue either. But at the same time, then I think sometimes like the solutions have been mooted as can the referee make the announcement of what's happening, and even then I'm not a fan of that either, because I feel like, I think I've written about this before, and it's just like as if the whole kind of the whole sort of apparatus around refereeing and VAR, it's just too big. There's simply like, I don't know, it's a bit simplistic, but there's just too much refereeing. It should be in the background as far as is humanly possible, and I really think only used for major incidents, things that have been blatantly and obviously missed, because then it just becomes too much part of the spectacle when it really shouldn't be. I think it's one of the kind of oldest sayings about referees is like, he's had a good game if you don't notice him, but it's still too. The whole kind of thing is still kind of too eager to insert itself into games. And I know this one's gone for Hibs, but I'll just kind of reiterate what I said. There will be an occasion where it doesn't. And I think I don't know, for me, I've never liked it. I don't think it's getting any better. And stuff like that last night doesn't enhance the game at all. But I'm going to completely contradict myself here. It did set up a barnstorming finish for Hibs. So, I mean, we've waited long enough now. We'll talk about that winning goal. Kind of came out of nowhere, because I thought the game was just meandering towards a 1-1 draw. It was probably, again, sorry if this sounds silly, but it was like, it was kind of the most goalless feeling 1-1 draw I think I've been to. There was just very kind of, little incident. It didn't look as if anybody was going to score. Obviously, the two goals that did win were kind of early in the game. And the game just kind of drifted for long periods, but then it only takes sort of one moment of quality, and we can maybe bring in the discussion around the subs, because I think three of them were involved in the goal. I think Obita is the one who makes the initial interception, goes to Dwight Gale, lays it off to Tannadice, and then through to Kieran Bowie. Either way, it's a lovely move. It's one of those goals that's really satisfying to watch back, like just one touch passing, cutting a team open, and to an extent you're kind of, oh my God, where has that been for 90 minutes? Because it was one of those kind of games where you felt like folk just weren't putting their foot on the ball. There was maybe one or two. Nathan Mariah Welsh, I thought, had another good game. But yeah, once that move kicks off, the pass from Tannadice is fantastic. Kind of on the move, straight. He's got to wait that. I know Kieran Bowie's quick, but you've still got to wait that perfectly, or it just goes through to the goalkeeper, or maybe less so. He doesn't get the angle for the shot, and then the finish is unbelievable, isn't it? It was just a brilliant goal all round.
Yeah, I think when you look at the first goal against Celtic at the weekend, and it was just a really well worked, aesthetically pleasing team goal. And then we're spoiled. We get a second one in however many days, 4 days. I'm trying to count here, 4 or 5 days, a few days. But yeah, you're right. It's just you are kind of thinking, where's that come from? Because I mean, there were I think for large parts of the game, you're thinking this is not pretty to watch. Ball's going to go home in an ambulance, that sort of thing. But I think it's David Gray loves sort of going back to his I've said this many times before, and then coming out with something, and he's like, fair enough, you have said that many times before. But he's always sort of pointed out about the use of subs, and saying that the 11 that start the game are never the 11 that finish the game. And I think early on the season, there were times when I don't think he was making the right subs, and I think there were some sort of curious decisions, and part of that comes down to what's going on in the game, who's struggling, what you're trying to get out of the game, what you think you can get out of the game. But there were times that substitutions were made, and you're thinking that's going to harm Hibs rather than help them. And I think it's probably probably one of those situations where it's a sort of relatively novice coach, and he's just learning as he goes. Because I think in recent weeks subs have been very good. If you look at the weekends, sort of bringing on Jordan Abita in midfield just to track runners, that's one of those decisions that earlier on the season, if he'd done that, would have been probably criticised quite heavily for it, saying you had like Joe Newell on the bench, you had other players who might be more suited to that role, but it was sort of bringing Jordan Abita on and knowing that in terms of his athleticism, his kind of ability on the ball, but also just his willingness to track runners and his defensive qualities was going to be really useful, and turned out that it was a good move. So I think when you looked at some of the players last night, quite clearly struggling. Josh Campbell, especially, when you think what he put into the game on Saturday, it was probably quite amazing that he lasted as long as he did last night. Same with, probably same with Nathan Mariah Welsh. I think it's probably part of the reason Bowie didn't start last night was maybe just to ensure you're not sort of overloading him and giving him too much too soon, because he also put in a power of work on Saturday. But really sensible sub at a time when, it did look like the game was kind of meandering to a draw, and you think a point probably isn't the worst result for either team. You had Dundee United, I think, pushing for a winner as well. And I think it's maybe just, Grays looked at that and thought, we've got quality on the bench. We've got, the experience of Dwight Gale. We've got the experience of Junior Hoylett and the quality that they both bring. And then you've got, Jordan Abita to kind of freshen things up on the flank, add a bit more defensive steel, and it's worked wonders. And I think when you look at the bench that Hibs had last night compared to what some of the sort of sub lineups earlier in the season, it was pretty strong. I mean, if you're an opposition manager and you're looking at the subs available, and you see Junior Hoylett, Dwight Gale, Kieran Bowie, Jordan Abita, Marvin Epitete as well, you're kind of thinking, Chris Cadden, another one. You're kind of thinking, there's a lot of quality on that bench, and I think credit to David Gray for getting to a stage where he's got players who can come in and play in the starting 11, whether they were on the bench in the previous game or not, and it doesn't sort of diminish the quality. It doesn't bring anything down in terms of performance levels, cohesion, you name it. But what I thought was quite interesting was Tannadice obviously gets the plaudits for the pass, which was it was sublime. I think I said sumptuous at the time when I tweeted about it. But it really was. It was just perfectly weighted. One of those sort of passes that you think it's a gift for the striker. Although I think as you point out, Kieran Bowie still had a bit of work to do. Took it really well. But Dwight Gale's role in both goals, the second goal and the third goal, kind of laying the ball off for Tannadice, so it sits up perfectly, and then that hooked pass for Hoylett for the third goal. Just that's what he's bringing to the team. That's what he's bringing to the squad. You're not going to get 90 minutes out of him every week, never mind 3 times in a week. But it's just about that, those little bits of quality that they can bring on, that experience. And I think in a situation like last night where it's a bit frantic, there's been the controversy over the the disallowed goals, there's been the controversy over the was it a corner, was it a goal kick? Just having players with that experience who've been through it before, just to kind of bring a bit of a calming influence to proceedings, but also that little bit of quality, so that if a space does open up, if there is that sort of window where you can think, if we get this right, then we've got a chance. That's obviously what the coaching staff have been thinking, and it's maybe been a bit risky to sort of go a bit more attacking rather than just trying to shore things up. But the bodies they've got on the bench are able to do both. They're able to bring on Jordan Abita, kind of firm up that left hand side, but also bring on attacking players. And I think it's worked at both ends. And I think it's a credit to the coaching staff and to David Gray, learning from, if not mistakes, maybe not the best decision making earlier on this season, and reaping the rewards now of having a squad that's full of players who can come in and compete, whether that's from the start or whether it's off the bench.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on Dwight Gale, his one touch play is brilliant, isn't it? It's so good. So just on David Gray, I mean, he was obviously delighted with the result last night and the manner of it, and the players kind of going to the well again to dig one out. But he wasn't entirely happy afterwards, and I think he made a few good points. It's like he's kind of typically, that was a really kind of emotional end to the game. the same way it was at the weekend. But he's kind of, he's consistently the most level-headed, I think, presence in the room.
Never get too high, never get too low.
Yeah, and he was kind of saying, it was. He got asked about, winning when you're not playing well, and he's like, he said something along the lines of, that's a good trait to have, but he was kind of saying that the performance does need to be better, because I think the exact phrase that he used was you can't grind out results all the time. I think that's quite an encouraging, thing to come out with in the aftermath of a game like that, where it could be, really easy just to get caught up in the emotion of the finish, the scenes at the end. But I think it's encouraging. I think that he acknowledges that you can't get away with that every week, because I think sometimes in the Scottish Premiership it's so kind of cutthroat, and a couple of results can really change the picture of where you are in the league table. That it's I know football is a results driven business, but I feel like the Scottish Premiership in particular is so results driven. Sometimes it can at the expense of performance, but I think really hammering home that the performance needs to be there as well as results is the way that you kind of build long term sustainable success. Because Hibs have been done so well to get themselves into the position that they are just now, and there have been some really good performances in there. But he's never shied away, David Gray, from when Hibs have come away with a result and without playing well, and obviously that has its its plus points. But I think it is an encouraging thing to hear from a manager that he is so focused on making sure that the performance is there, as well as results, because it's as I said, I think it is the way that you build something more sustainable, long term success, rather than just we kind of talked about how Hibs maybe weren't getting what they deserved from games earlier in the season. You look at some of the stats, the sort of underlying numbers, where it suggested that they were a better team than the results they were getting. But I think he's probably going to be quite guarded against that potentially going the opposite way, because you don't want to end up, in the kind of, I know it's been a very extreme example, but I think Aberdeen or the sort of cautionary tale that where they kind of got themselves to a point where they were picking up results, but it became quite common that people were looking at their numbers and the kind of what they were posting week to week and saying that that's not sustainable. So I think probably he's not going to accept too many of those performances. He'll take that result every single week, but I don't think I think he'll have made it clear that I think in general it probably needs to be better than that. But again, I'm going to contradict myself here by just as we finish, because Sunday's game is the ultimate example of one of those occasions where nobody cares about performance. It's all about getting a result when it's a derby. That sort of principle does go out the window a wee bit, but it's teed up so nicely now for Hibs v Hearts on Sunday. It's been a bit of a turnaround for both sides. Hearts have climbed the table. Hibs have obviously rocketed up the table as well. And it's poised very nicely, isn't it?
I like to use there that Hibs have rocketed up the table, but Hearts have just climbed it. It's like the pre-derby mind game's beginning already. I like that.
That wasn't even deliberate. I was just trying to vary my use of words there, and I think I might have overshot the runway a wee bit by saying rocketed. But there you go.
You know what? We'll take it. But no, you're right. It's just to go back to your point about David Gray and the performances. I think. Gray's always said this about guarding against complacency. And, I think when you look at previous Hibs teams, no matter who the manager is, no matter who the players are, more often than not, in fact, worryingly frequently, they put in a really good performance, whether that's in Europe on the Thursday night, whether it's against, Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, Aberdeen, and then they followed it up with a performance that is, really sort of stunk out the place. And it's been a source of great frustration, because you're looking at it and thinking how can you go to Tynecastle and win? How can you beat Celtic at home? How could you beat Rangers and then come up against a team that the sort of respective level suggests that you should have more chance of beating, and it quite often ended in a draw or defeat. And I think that's something that probably rankled with David Gray. I mean, he was in teams that happened to. In the Championship and then again in the Premiership, where, any hope and momentum was completely dashed by, just like a sort of really meek performance after a really good one. And I think that's something he's been very good at, is sort of ensuring that the players, you talk about the not getting too high, not getting too low, and just that consistency, and just, making sure there's not any complacency, and it's just, just keep going, keep doing what we're doing. We know that it works. I think it was like this during the bad run of form at the start of the season, where it was, as we pointed out, the results maybe weren't reflecting the performances. Gray said that last night. He said the third time they played Dundee United this season, and it's probably their worst performance, yet it's the one they've won. And I think that kind of sums it up. That they were, they weren't great last night, but did manage to get 3 points, and that as I said at the top of the show, that's a sign of a team that is going places. If they can not be at their best but still manage to grind out results, that's a good sign. But I think ever since he's become head coach, I think Gray has been very much a man of standards, and I think that's on the training pitch, it's on the pitch on a Saturday or a Wednesday night. I think it's around the training centre. I think it's just about having this kind of atmosphere. And I think it's probably linked to the fact that the group is really really close, really really tightly knit. I think when you look at how players who maybe haven't got off the bench in some of these wins are celebrating them at the end as if they've scored the winner. I think that's that sort of tells you where the team spirit's at, and I think that's you rely on that sort of team spirit on nights like last night where you're maybe struggling. It's a bit of a battle. But at the back of your mind, you've got that kind of connection. You've got that sort of, that good feeling in the squad that I think can happen. They don't know when they're beaten. All it takes is that little bit of quality. So, as you point out, Derby at the weekend, that completely goes out the window. I mean, you've got, if anything, it's worse than usual because you've got two teams who are in, very good form, with players who are, in good form individually, and it's two big teams hoping to be finishing sort of the best of the rest, and it is set up for, quite frankly, one of the worst games you will see this season.
You were going to say that.
It's just that's it's one of those things. I mean, people always say form goes out the window when it comes to derbies. I mean, that's not always the case, but they are kind of like it's like a game within a game. It's a very separate. A very kind of separate, occasion to the rest of the season, if you like. But I think Hibs have put themselves in a really good place going into it. I can imagine there'll be a desire from Gray and the coaching staff for a better performance than we saw last night. Don't let the standards slip, especially when it's Hearts. I think Hearts will be buoyed by how they came back from a goal down last night to get a win, just like Hibs did. So it should be, on paper, it should be like a really good game, but you just wonder, well, at the back of your mind, when you consider what the two teams are playing for, when you consider their respective positions in the league, it'll be interesting as well because there's games on Saturday that could have an impact on, on the table as well. So that, that could have an effect on how things play out as well. But, I think it's interesting that we've gone from like the first derby of the season when the two teams were at a really low ebb, and I think the game kind of reflected that, to then having a game on Boxing Day where Hibs were probably still the kind of start of their turnaround. It's basically, you think they just gone up to Pittodrie on the weekend before, and it's won quite comfortably. But again, you're thinking, can they keep it going for the derby? Can they raise the level again? So, I think that there's actually really fascinating to see, how Hibs sort of cope with it. It's the third game in a week. It's a derby against a team, a Hearts team that's going really well. But, you look at how Hibs have been performing, you look at the performance against Celtic, you look at the fact they got 3 points last night, and, a lot to be confident about. So, it should be a very good game. Whether or not it will be remains to be seen. But, I think when you look down to, Hibs just taking it a game at a time and saying, you overtake the team in front of you in the table, and then once you've done that, that's when you maybe start looking at, you cement your place in the top six, and then after that, it's, can you push for Europe? But I think, if you looked at this 3-game week, I mean, before it happens, people looking at it, fans and, opposition fans, pundits, whatever, looking at it and saying, Celtic, Dundee United, and Hearts inside a week. That's that's a difficult, that's a difficult run of fixtures. And I think if anyone had suggested that Hibs would take 6 points out of 6 from the first two, there might have been questions asked about sanity and things like that. But I think it's another big test for Hibs. It's another test for Gray and the players. Can they keep this momentum going? Can they sort of, I suppose, reset after as you say, another emotional game, full of drama, full of incident, and I suppose just kind of block out the noise and just go again. Because I think when you look at how they've rocketed up the table, and how the performances have been. The performances have been quite up and down. There's been some games where you think they're probably lucky to get anything out of it, but they're finding a way. And I think David Gray would probably love a performance against Hearts similar to the one against Celtic. But at the same time, if it's a scrappy game and somebody forces a winner for Hibs in the 92nd minute, I don't think he'll be too upset either. So I think it's really a game to look forward to. That you've got two teams in high confidence and in good form, and I think both sets of fans are probably due a good game for a change.
Absolutely,
but we've been around football for too long to know that's probably not going to be the case.
So as we say, it's teed up so nicely. So over the next few days, we'll be building into that. So do join us on our website and YouTube channel for a comprehensive preview of Hibs 0, Hearts 0 on Sunday. No, let's not speak that into existence. It's going to be a cracker.
Both sides would take a point for them.
Yeah, we'll manifest. Wouldn't be a bad result. We'll manifest a good game into existence. Press conference tomorrow. David Gray and players will be looking ahead to the game. So as I said, keep an eye on the website and our YouTube channel. Do please consider subscribing to the channel, because it means we'll continue to grow it, continue to bring you video content. It means you'll get a notification every time we go live. It means you can join in on the comments as well. So do get involved in that if you haven't already. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, folks. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope you enjoy the derby on Sunday, but we will speak to you again before then. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one, and we'll speak to you again soon. Cheers.